it's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, this is Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. And thank you for joining us at the top of the year on 2024. We're really excited about this year. We're really excited about the lineup we have of guests and different things we're going to be bringing forward. Of course, I always want to say, if there's something you want to hear, we want to hear it from you. So reach out to us with great recommendations, with themes and series. What do you want to know? And let us be of service. So let's talk about my guest today. Tina Larsson is a colleague, a businesswoman who I go back personally a very long way with in New York City. When she was building her business in the early days of networking, I was building Slater Success in the early days of networking. And we've kept up a relationship. And if you're a follower of Her Success Story, you know the value that I believe in keeping up relationships. And it is my pleasure to bring Tina as a guest today. Why? She is the powerhouse behind the Folson Group. It's New York's premier co-op and condo consultant who helps New York's condo and co-op owners increase their property values. So why did I want to interview Tina? Well, I've owned a condo in New York City. My husband was president of the board. I have friends who own condos. I know people who own real estate in a variety of places. And this isn't, ladies and gentlemen, this isn't just about New York. There are condos and co-ops all over the country that the Folson Group is expanding into. And it had me starting to think, when Tina and I reconnected and we're chatting, you need to hear this story. You need to hear this story of how Tina took an opportunity and ran with it. So Tina, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Ivy. Thank you for having me and for that wonderful introduction.
So let's go back like 3 steps, because I just threw a lot at our listeners. This beginning of the Folson Group. I remember when you guys were first getting started in New York. What helped you shift? You have a background in finance. Where did condos and co-ops come from, and why?
Yes. Okay. I'm going to tell you. Great question. So I have a background from finance. I worked on Wall Street. My husband did too at the time, and we owned a co-op. For the first few years, we didn't really pay attention. And then every year the maintenance was increasing, and that's common charges or HOA fees, whatever you want to, it's called different in different places. And it was increasing every year. And one year we just looked at each other and we're like, why is it increasing so much? So we spoke with some of our neighbors, and it turns out that they felt the same way. So we got some neighbors together and we organized a coup. So we took over the board. But I'm actually not on the board. I was never on the board. My husband is, just like your husband.
Gotcha.
And but the new board asked me if I could use my financial background to help them save some money. So I did what I know from finance, which is that you need some comparison. So I went out, pretended to be a buyer to get the financial statements for other buildings. And once I had enough data, we made some phone calls, eliminated some services, and we were able to save our building $340,000 in the first 3 years.
That's a significant amount that trickles down to the people who are paying these maintenance fees, whether they're HOA fees or maintenance. It doesn't matter. There's communities all across this country. And I know as we get older and we want less, right, responsibility in our homes, we very often downsize and go into a community, if it's a townhouse or it's a home community, that has amenities and services, and hence your HOA fees.
Mm-hmm. And this was a huge amount. So it's actually 10% of the total annual cost in our building. So when I was out networking, you know how much everybody wants to meet another financial advisor? maybe you do.
Hold on, less than 1%. Let's talk numbers here. It's like you show up at a great networking group. It's like, oh, I'm a financial advisor, and I'm a financial advisor. I hear you.
So instead of introducing myself as such, I introduced myself as I'm Tina Larsson, and I helped my co-op save $340,000. And a lot of people said, "Ooh, can I introduce you to my board?"
Wow.
Sure. Yeah. So I went home. I spoke with my.
So you hit the pain point.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love
So
it.
I went home. I asked my husband. We hung up shingles, and the rest is history.
So you and I were networking in New York in the last 10, 15 plus years together. And you had a small budding company, you and your husband, and you were making a difference. And then I always say what's interesting is a catalyst happens. And for you, for the Folson Group, the catalyst was the pandemic.
Yes.
And it's interesting because there were many businesses during the pandemic that blew up and many businesses that got hurt during the pandemic or has residual effects of getting hurt from the pandemic. And I know businesses in both categories. Okay. We look at like Amazon blew up. Great example. It's like, we don't want to go out, Amazon delivers. How did that catalyst of the pandemic, what happened with your company and how did you realize it, most importantly?
So it was actually on many levels. I know that we only spoke about one level. So one level was that yeah. So one level was that we were very limited. So board members are volunteers. Because they're volunteers, they meet outside of the regular working hour. Yeah. Which means that they typically work, and if they then worked in the city prior to the pandemic, they worked in the city and their building is out in Queens or Brooklyn or in the Bronx or something, they have to get home, they have to quickly grab something to eat, and then they have their meeting probably at 7 p.m. That meant that they know who wants to meet on a Friday, right? So there were 4 days, Monday through Thursday, where we could meet with the boards in person. They invited us to meet in their basement, in their super's office or something. So we are two partners, and we could meet with at the most 4 buildings or 4 clients or potential clients per week. Or if we split each other up, we could meet 8, right?
So you're very limited. You know, when I talk about scalability, you're very limited in scaling unless you expanded your team to know what you did in sales, et cetera, et cetera. So there was a limitation of what you and your husband to max profitability could do.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And then March 17th, I think, 2020. Everybody moved to Zoom, okay? So now everybody's on Zoom, which means that if we have half-hour meetings, we can meet with boards and prospect boards. We can meet 10 a day, right? We could potentially split up, so we met 20 a day.
It's very different number ratio, Miss Finance.
Yes, yes. Yeah, so that really increased how I mean, they completely changed our business. Yeah. It also changed it on a level that we became much closer to our clients and our prospects, because now all of a sudden, because it's now just common way of doing business is to jump on a Zoom call. So all of a sudden we have a much closer relationship with our clients because we just say, well, let's just jump on a Zoom call, right? And that builds a much stronger relationship. Another thing was that boards who now all of a sudden was working from at home. So let's say we had one board, for instance, they wanted to do their lobby. They wanted to renovate their lobby. It was from the 90s or something, and they had been talking about it for 10 years, but they never had the time. Now, all of a sudden, they were working from at home. They saw it every day.
From home, they can actually look at the projects that
they can oversee the project more. They might have a few. They might be a little bit more flexible with their time. You know, running downstairs as opposed to coming home from Midtown. So, and now it was an eyesore. They saw it every single day when they walked in and out of the building. So a lot of projects that had been on hold for a long, long time, all of a sudden started coming back, and they were revisiting them. And then local law 97 happened. It was passed in 2019. And
Okay,
local
so I
law,
was going to say, I need you to explain, because we have a lot of listeners not from the New York area. We have a lot of
yes,
listeners not from the New York area. So it's important to understand the different things, because even if you're listening from a different state, a different province or whatever, there are things in your world that it might not be called this law 97, Tina,
yeah,
but there will be something.
yes. So this is a law where New York City, and it's passed in several other states since then. So it's a law where New York City is planning to be carbon neutral by 2050. And they're fining buildings that do not meet their carbon emission limits per square foot. And it was just passed last month in New Jersey. And I believe that it passed in California, and Massachusetts appear to be next. So it appears to be a trend, and it created a lot of extra work for us. Yeah. So, and the fines for non-compliance are huge. I mean, we have one of the buildings down the street. They're gonna get fined $250,000 a year.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So these buildings have to take action. I also know there's other laws in New York. I don't know what the comparable laws, but I'm sure there are comparable laws on local law 11, which is buildings that have been built X amount, right? They have to be inspected. Right? There's unfortunately things that are falling off buildings in life. If it's a brick, if it's a whatever it is, or things get old, and we want to keep our neighborhood safe. And I'm putting it very broadly there.
Yes, we want to keep our neighborhood safe, and the residents.
Yes.
I mean, everybody needs to be safe. And I mean, it was very unfortunate, and I mean, it was disaster what happened in the condo collapse in Surfside, Florida. I mean, I have no words, but I mean, that is really the worst case scenario. But there are other unsafe conditions that need to be addressed. Yes, definitely.
And so when you go in and do the work you do, share a little bit about that process. And because I have a bunch of questions, because it's as a businesswoman, it has been beautiful in watching you truly scale this organization and the work you're doing. So share a little bit about your process. And then I want to talk about how you've expanded your clients, because I think that's also really relevant.
Okay, great. Thank you. So when we started with our cost reduction services, where we work on a contingency. We split the savings with our clients for the first 2 years. After 2 years, they keep all the savings. And that can be we'll go through all of their 150 line items, compare them with our database. And then we have a long list of various measurements that we take, and then we actually get on the phone, we renegotiate. We're the ones who act as the owner's rep on the behalf of the board and take care of fixing the problem. And it can be anything from exterminating service, telephone services, those small items, to elevator replacement or larger services. Very often it's heating, water, electricity, and insurance are the most common 4 items, but we work on all items. Then, in order for us to calculate savings, we have to have something to compare to.
Makes sense.
So then we had a client who wanted to hire us, but they had nothing to compare to, because they said, we don't have enough time to go out and get any bids. We don't know what to do. We don't even know what to tell them. So,
and that's so often when companies get into not comparing apples to apples, or they go out and they get their own bids, but they don't know the area. This is not their area of expertise. So they're not truly comparing, as I'll say in a very rudimentary way, comparing apples to apples.
That's correct.
Okay.
But in this case, they had nothing. And they had a long list of things that they wanted to do. And the board were all on different pages. So it was a little bit of us working with the culture and the communication within the board also. One person wanted to change the boiler, one person wanted to paint the hallways, one person wanted to do something else. It was, yeah.
You have to create alignment.
Yes. So we helped them get on board and prioritize. So we were going to handle all the different projects that they wanted to do, but we prioritized them. You got to take care of the leak before you can start painting, right? And but they had nothing to compare to. So they suggested to us, they said, well, why don't you just charge us a project management fee? And we're like, sure. And
and then how did you learn how to figure out how to do that?
Well, it turns out I've been taking a project management course, and it turns out that I have done projects my entire life.
Yeah.
I just didn't realize that I did. So
you know what? I want to go here for a second, because there's so often we know more than we realize we know. And we, even within our own businesses, if we're early in a business, we think we don't know enough. So then we're looking at ourselves. Well, like, I really don't know enough. And we're self-judging, and we're self-critical. Do I know enough to charge the value out there? And, and then we look at it, and I speak to so many people. It's like, well, no, I'm going to get this certification, and I'm going to go do this. And they're like, I've been doing this. I know exactly what. I was like, yes, you just needed to see it.
And speaking of that, I actually never got around. We've been so busy that I never got around to take the certification, but I took the first few courses and I realized that I've been doing this my entire life.
Right.
Yeah. And one of the things, our best clients are very often someone who is either a consultant who understands, you surround yourself with professionals and then they take care of it, or people who are some kind of project management person. So it can be an events planner. Very often the photographers do a lot of coordination. Anyone who does a lot of coordination, those are typically very good for us to have on one of those people on the board, because they understand the benefit of bringing us in and moving things along and how to get it done.
So so now all of a sudden, let's talk about this. All of a sudden, pandemic happens and you realize, okay, we can meet more than 4 or 8 boards a week. So we have an opportunity here. So now you have to go, you get the opportunity, but you have to go expand your client base. What did you guys do differently than what you had been doing? Because this is, when you and I chat, this was one of the game changers. And although it seems, of course, it doesn't mean we get it and do it, of course. So you and your husband, it's like, okay, oh my God, we have more time. What do we do?
Yeah. So now we have to find more clients, because now we can fill in more people here. Yeah. So we did a bunch of market research. What is it that you really need? What is it so we spoke with a lot of boards, and we asked them what their pain points were. And we had a little bit of directed questions to try to figure out what it was that they really need.
I love, by the way, I'm a huge fan of the market research piece, and I find too many people skip it, and you gain so much insight. So hats off to you. I love the market research piece.
Thank you. And in retrospect, we should have done it much earlier, but what are you going to do?
Be that as it may.
But what happened was that we realized that our cost reduction services, they are something that are very nice to have. It's something that every single board say, sure, that's a nice thing to have, but they have too many emergencies. There's no urgency about that service, right? Whereas if the boiler stops working, that is pretty urgent.
It's very urgent in the winter in the Northeast.
Yes. So most projects are really much more urgent. And one of the projects that is most urgent, I'll share this one, is that 9 out of 10 times when we speak with boards, they right away, they tell us that they feel underserved by their property manager. And that is something that they really feel very urgently about. So that is our newest service. So we have a property management search service, and that we do nationwide already, and where we help them find, and we basically have a discovery call. What is it that you really can't stand about your current? Where is your lack, and what is it that you absolutely need in your new support person or company? And then we do the entire search, the RFP, customized interview, pre-interviews and interviews, and we help them make a decision.
Nice. So what has surprised you in this business in the years you've been running it?
What surprised me the most is that our cost reduction services is not a priority. That really surprised me. I mean, it doesn't cost them anything.
It's, it's so interesting because what you're hitting is spot on. We make assumptions of what people need, and we sell them what we are assuming they need without that key piece that you were just talking about, as far as ask your clients, ask your prospects, take 30 days, 60 days and do some market research. Put some time aside in your calendar and set up interviews and gain knowledge, and then be of service to your clients and your prospects, and you will have so much better long-lasting relationships.
Yes, exclamation point.
What is one piece of advice you would put out there? What is one piece of advice you would put out there for I'm going to throw it out there with a woman leader, because you're playing very much in a boys' club out there in your area. And yet, I will say, and hats off to your husband, in leading and growing this brand and the visibility you've taken to home.
Thank you.
What's your one thought for other women leaders to lead, take the helm? What's that piece of advice you would share?
To build a personal brand.
Tell me more.
Be out there, be everywhere. I didn't know how to, people said you have to be on social media. I'm like, how do I do that? Surround yourself by the people who know how to help you get there. And find your core group of experts and lean into them. Yes, absolutely. That is my number one, actually.
I love that. That's and it's just true. It's everything I truly strongly believe in.
Yes.
Tina, thank you for joining me. And my goodness, I can't believe it took us this long to actually get an interview for the two of us. So hats off to us.
Hats off to us. This was great. Thank you so much for having me, Ivy.
And listeners, take a moment. And I will say this always, take a moment, take a breath. I thank you for listening in today. What was most helpful to you in listening to this podcast with Tina from the Folson Group? Okay. Find some place, write it down, make a note in your phone, on a Post-it note, and then make your decision. What are you going to do with that piece of information that was meaningful to you? Create your action. And with the continuous actions, we make a difference as business leaders. Thank you so much for joining me on Her Success Story today. Stay tuned for some more exciting things we have coming up. And again, let us know who you want to hear, what series you want. We are developing new things for 2024, and we want your input. See you next time.